Well, thank you. We appreciate that. All right, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. We were having kind of an interesting conversation before a lot of you logged on, and Nathan's been part of our coffee group now for a while, and he's been attending our coffee, so I'm anxious to hear more about what he's doing. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Hromanik with Kinamorh Productions. Go ahead and take it away, Nathan.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to start off by setting up a screen share here real quick because it's going to help me stay organized. So bada bing, setting up screen share and present, bada bing. Okay, so starting off, my name is Nathan Hromanik. I also go by Nathan Kinamorh. That is my trade name. It's just my last name backwards because it's easier for people who don't know how to pronounce Czech names to read. And it's also a really easy way to just, have a business name without, having to think real hard about it. So today I'm going to be talking about two aspects of business that I do as an individual. And the first one being that I am a career entertainment worker. So I am someone that is full-time stagehand and studio mechanic in the state of Nebraska. There are not many people who can claim that at all. Like, I take calls for local IATSE 42 and local 151, and IATSE is the International Alliance of Stage and Theater Employees. And so we're going to go through this real quick. I've been at this since I was 17 years old. On the left, that's me being a radio DJ at Southwest Minnesota State University. I had a radio show for multiple semesters where I hosted the Friday Night Rock Block, inspired by Alpha Media's 104.1 The Blaze, because I was, I'm all about music and stuff like that, being a stagehand now. And on the right, you see a picture of me being camera assistant in the rain, trying to protect our red camera from getting destroyed. I served after going to school at Southwest Minnesota State University for radio and television broadcast and graphic design. I found out that I was a little bit ahead of my instructors in my class because I was the lab assistant for the graphic design lab, and I was taking students to film festivals and productions, and I was essentially putting in more work and accomplishing things than my tuition was paying for. Essentially, my tuition was just paying for access to equipment, materials, and ability to get things done. So I joined the Marine Corps to be able to get better opportunities. On the bottom left, that's me with my night crew in Afghanistan in 2012. And then on the right, that's me posing with one of my role models that I look up to. His name's Lloyd Kaufman. He's in charge of the trauma independent film and media circuit. And that was me when I was volunteering at Comic-Con San Diego in 2013. Yep. On the left, this is me in our production suite when I was going to school at Tribeca Flashpoint Academy, and me running a China ball kind of thing, to kind of like showcase like how dedicated I am to what I do. That was my living room when I was going to school in Chicago. So I was renting like a 1-bedroom apartment, and not only was I attending one of the top film schools in the Midwest, I also had to make sure that I was able to do it in my living room. And I was doing streams, and I was like doing reviews and stuff like that. And I had a 2-camera setup in a living room, and I'm standing next. I had a whole bunch of shelves with the computer set up and everything. This here is like a showcase of some of the production design and artwork I've done. In the upper right is the Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, because as an independent freelancer for being a stagehand and studio mechanic, Arrowhead Stadium calls up me and some of my fellow motivators to do arena builds. And since we do arena builds in Arrowhead Stadium, they also call us to shovel the snow in Arrowhead Stadium. These are a bit more recent. This is me on the left doing special effects special effects makeup for a local small film production in Nebraska, because I volunteer where I can. I'm not necessarily able to take every single call, but I take calls as appropriate. And then on the right, that's me when I was participating and helping with Omaha Film Festival pre-COVID. So this here is kind of like a representation of the goals I work towards as an individual, right? So being a freelance stagehand and studio mechanic means that the first and most important aspect that I need to identify as a laborer is I need to have a sole proprietorship, right? So if you are someone, or if you're someone that has like specific skill set and you get contracted out to do labor calls on a regular basis, you need to have your sole proprietorship squared away. Like that paperwork needs to be done. Like in my field, you can't just count on being a laborer. You can't just count on someone giving you calls and like, that's how it's going to go. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine, because you have to think of your skills and your trade as a business, right? So I have to essentially compartmentalize all the different creative endeavors that I want to do as their own individual businesses, and just myself as talent and skill in being a stagehand and studio mechanic, I have to have like a sole proprietorship squared away, which is why I also go by Nathan Kinamorh as a trade name, because whenever I'm taking bids or I'm preparing invoices, I use Nathan Kinamorh, because that's how I compartmentalized, okay, I need to have an invoice. I need to know like what kind of expenses are going to be for this project. Like, are there going to be kit fees? Like the whole nine, the whole shebang. And if there's one universal truth that I've found in the over decade that I've been at this now, is that some schools and universities need to do, when it comes to media work anyways, need to really like hammering that home. Like it needs to be like really leaned on. Like film schools and media schools, or any school that's teaching individuals to be skilled labor, if the student is graduating and they don't have their sole proprietorship squared away, they've already failed, essentially. Because the thing is that when you're working in my industry, everything costs money. Like you have to spend money to make money. And just driving to the gig, like that's the cost for your vehicle maintenance, your equipment fees, your kit fees, all that stuff needs to be tracked, and it needs to be part of your expenses. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be a full-on LLC, because you might not have employees, but you as the talented individual for whatever like media skill you're working on, you need to at least have a sole proprietorship squared away. Because what ended up happening for me during COVID is because I'm actually a year behind when it comes to my business goals. And what happened is because I didn't have all my sole proprietorship stuff squared away pre-COVID, I lost out on all the PPE, like all the COVID grants and all the COVID loans, the PPP loans that were available when they came out. I won't be able to get them. Like I am entirely reliant when it came to the COVID situation happening on the unemployment program, on the unemployment and the CARES Act affecting the call stewards that I take calls for. So that would be IATSE Local 42 in Omaha, and that would be IATSE Local 151 in Lincoln, as well as an independent call steward that I take calls for. And that was the only way that I was able to get COVID CARES Act funding for this horrible situation that's taken place and stuff like that, right? And if there's one thing that really needs to be like seriously like ground into the head of every single young Zoomer, motivator, millennial that you know, is that they need to have a sole proprietorship. At least have a sole proprietorship. They need to at least identify themselves as a business in this new gig economy. Okay, like you can't just go around thinking, like, even if you're working at a gas station and you're just doing some voiceover work here and there, or you're you're working at a restaurant and every now and again you take some calls to do like lighting, or you do some sound or some carpentry work. Like, you have to have a sole proprietorship, because we're in a capitalistic country and no one cares about you being a human being. You only care about how much money you bring in to the GDP. Like, if you can't prove that you're making money, then you're not going to get any support, right? And that's one thing that I spend a lot of time mentoring other young artists. And one of the things I try to do is I try to help prevent brain drain. As someone who's a born and raised Nebraskan that works in the entertainment industry, brain drain is a huge problem in my field. Like, every single summer, I'm seeing talent just leave and go, right? And a lot of times what's happening is that this talent are people that haven't properly set up their business as an individual to be able to properly sell their skills. And so what ends up happening is they end up not really getting anywhere and undercutting themselves and not progressing as an individual. So me, as a career stagehand and studio mechanic, I created Nathan Kinamorh as a trade name to be able to have tracking purposes for me as an individual business, as just skilled labor. As skilled labor, I created sole proprietorship to be able to actually track the expenses and do taxes for just taking calls. And that's calls for all the major venues in Nebraska. That's from the Bourbon in Lincoln to CHI Health Center to sometimes going out of state at the Pepsi Center in Denver, right? And so you need to have a sole proprietorship. Like, any young hard charger that's going to be seeing this, have at least set up a sole proprietorship. Like, keep track of that, and you'll find out really quick how important that is. Because just relying on your employer to take care of you is not going to happen. Okay, you need to be taking care of yourself, and you need to think of yourself as an individual, as a business, when it comes to selling your skills and selling your time, right? So that's my first aspect that I wanted to talk about today. And then the second one is that since I'm an entertainment worker, I also create and make my own intellectual properties, right? And so the intellectual property that I am working towards is actually a video game. So, boom. Boom. Are you all able to see that? All right, so I'm working on a video game. Video games are the most difficult form of entertainment to make in the history of mankind, okay? You have short films, you have like feature films, you have television production. That's nothing compared to making a video game, okay? Television production is known for going over 90 days of production and can be millions of dollars. And they can like knock it out, like, you know, they start in May and they go all the way into August, and then like there's a whole cycle, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of people that work on it. But video games can take years, right? And the video game I'm working on, it's a working title because I have to worry about trademark and copyright. You'll be seeing why here later on, but I'm gonna give you a quick concept art vibe of what I'm gonna be presenting here in a moment. So Slipstream 5000 is an aerial combat arcade racer, okay? It's competitive simcade racing. So it's kind of like Mario Kart, but in the sky. If any of you have ever played Mario Kart or are familiar with kart racing, because it's aerial, you're aerial, you're having combat, it's arcade that's dictating like the style, and then racing is the competitive nature of the game, right? These are these are concept artworks that have already existed, because this is a market that people want, and it's not uncommon to go on like Unreal Marketplace or Unity and find like initial builds of people trying to do this, but they have a very small team. It's maybe like 3 or 4 of them, and like it doesn't go anywhere, and it just fails because it's very difficult to make a video game. My plans for this video game aren't going to be, it's not going to be released till 2025. Okay, so it's not even going to be a thing that people are going to see till 2025. Like, I have people who are ready to go and ready to work on it, but being a union grade studio mechanic, I'm not going to bring anybody on board until I have paperwork and contracts squared away for them, so that they know that I'm not, you know, wasting their time, kind of thing. This here, like, understanding the market, like there is a lot of people who want, what's the word I'm looking for? Wish fulfillment, right? We live in the 2020s. Where's my flying car, right? It's 2021 and I don't have a flying car, right? So Slipstream 5000 it's 10 jets, 10 racers, 10 tracks, 10 songs with 10 weapons, right? So feature creep is able to kind of be avoided. And feature creep is like when you're working on a game and you keep on adding things and adding things and adding things and adding things to the point where like you can't even finish the game. This is a game where you're going into it where it's a racing game. You know, I know right off the bat how many tracks I'm going to have. I know right off the bat how many models for vehicles I'm going to need to make, and how much music I'm going to need for each track, kind of thing. And then understanding the problem for like selling the game, because it's a product, right? There is wish fulfillment for needing a flying car. There is already a huge market for simulated flight and stuff like that. And then there's, of course, co-op, right? Local co-op is intended, and then multiplayer co-op would actually be a whole nother cost, because that's a service, right? The concept of this game is that we go gold and we have just the single deliverable, which has the ability to play the game locally on your own system. But if I ever wanted to do like online multiplayer, that is actually going to be a totally separate charge. Like, that's like going live, having a live service and having dedicated servers for multiplayer is a totally another cost that I don't even really get into when I'm talking to people about this kind of game, because you have a product and you have a service, and you have to have those two things separated. So creating the product of the video game comes first, and then later, if people like it and we want to do multiplayer, we're like, okay, well then you're gonna have to pay X amount to have like an official tag for multiplayer, and then do all that kind of crazy stuff. So Red Bull already has aerial racing. There is competitive air racing that already exists, right? And I got motivators over at Duncan Aviation that owe me favors. I got a lot of favors that I can call in for making this game happen. The thing is that as someone who's starting a business, I'm not going to call in those favors until I have all my paperwork squared away, right? So what does that mean? That means I have to have my LLC squared away. I have to have my advisors on board. I have to have my trademarks and my copyrights ready to go. Now, I can't get a trademark until after I release some kind of deliverable, which means that I would have to create a track with at least some planes in it and be able to do some kind of pre-release or do some kind of sale. But I'm going to, I think that's the end of this part. Yeah. So what is Slipstream 5000, right? Well, check this out. Boom. Let me turn. Well, I got sound for this. Boom. Turn that down. Let's go down to 10. All right. So what you're seeing on screen right now. Hold on. Get a less busy background on here. Let's go with, sorry, I'm trying to pull up a blank background for this to be in front of. This is good. All right, so So this right here that we're looking at is called Slipstream 5000. And it's actually a pre-existing intellectual property from 1995, okay? This was considered one of the first cross-platform games ever designed in the history of video games, okay? It is made, it was made by Gremlin Interactive, and I am in good standing with the original developers. I'm in good standing with the original developers, and I can hit them up. I can hit them up for getting clearances and potentially optioning out the rights for this intellectual property, and being able to, you know, go take this game full bore. The thing is that I can't do that unless I have all my ducks in a row. Like, I got to have my lawyer, I got to have an accountant, I got to have a lawyer on retainer because this is a UK game, right? So Slipstream 5000 isn't trademarked in the United States, but it is trademarked in the UK. And there are people who have the licenses for selling this game on Steam and Good Old Games, right? Now, the reason why it's important for me to showcase what's going on in this game right now is because it is an example of all the primary mechanics that make it a good game. Like, I don't necessarily have a deliverable to be able to showcase to you that would be really like inspiring, right? But this game here was made over 20 years ago, and it has all of the aspects like of what makes a really good competitive racing game. There's announcers, they do a previs kind of thing. Like, they give you a tour of the track. There's like people talking about what's going on the track while it's happening. They go back to the announcer. You got this little hangar bay here where you can purchase your weapons beforehand, before the race. These are your 10 different weapons. This is like your leveling up system, right? Because every time you race, you get money for how successful you're doing in your race, right? All right, and now. So I just hit that other racer right there, right? Now, be mindful, this right here, it looks like it's all just like pixel anime, like just like sprites and stuff like that, but this is actually one of the first 3D, one of the first like legitimate MS-DOS full 3D games. Like, boom, just ran into that person right there, right? Boom. There's combat collisions. Like, if I run into this wall enough, I spin out and it reorientates me on the track. So it reorientates me on the predetermined path, right? And the things that you're seeing on this screen are what we consider essential gameplay elements and mechanics that are vital for like describing in a pitch situation, or when I'm describing like to other developers or programmers or artists, like what the expectation is for when we're developing this game in present day. So we would be developing this game in Unity, and it would be developed with the intent of being in VR. So right now we're flying through the Grand Canyon, right? We're flying through the Grand Canyon, and we have a track on the upper left that moves and rotates based off of where we are on the track. We have a rear view mirror, like all these combat collisions and stuff. You have engine damage, control damage, weapon blasters. You can change through turbo. The pilots are able to communicate to each other a bit, like right there. So based off of how you interact with the other pilots on the map will trigger whether or not they'll communicate with you over the radio, which gives it a style that is not very common. So there's a lot of people that try to make aerial combat arcade racers, but one of the reasons why it doesn't really sell is because, like, oh, you're just flying around shooting in a jet. You have no boom. So I got so much damage dealt to me that my ship just blew up. So there are consequences. There are consequences to like having engine damage and stuff like that.
Hey, try taking your foot off the brakes.
And now I have to straight up exit out of the race. I have to go all the way out to the beginning, right? And there's an aesthetic that comes with this that gives it a sense of style that people will like, oh my God, they'll go nuts for, right? Because it's all about having fun. Like a lot of games these days They'll have like a mechanic focus, like it's a first-person shooter or something like that, and then they create heroes. They have like, oh, it's all hero shooters and stuff like that, and every hero has its own like unique story and things like that. Well, guess what? Someone was thinking of this over 20 years ago, right? If I go and I click like this guy right here, right? This is Cobra.
Cobra
This is
and
his
the
ship.
NU3 series
They give you
Viper.
some
An
information
intimidating-
about it,
Hi,
and we're just gonna start right off with that.
Slipstreamers.
So you can also, there's different views. There's different views, camera views, and all kinds of fun stuff. Now,
Room for two more?
the reason why I want to make a video game is because Nebraska needs motivation. Like in my industry, in arts and entertainment, we lose so much talent to brain drain, right? That all of our best and brightest end up leaving the state. I'm gonna stop the screen share real quick.
Hey, Nathan, 15.
Yeah, 15, thank you. All of our artists end up leaving the state, right? And so earlier I started off by stating that like video games are the most difficult thing to make. And the thing is that by knowing that video games are the most difficult thing to make, and knowing that this is a project that's going to take years of my life. Like it's already, to be honest, I've actually attempted to do this before in the past. Like I've actually already attempted to work on this game in the past, and I couldn't get it off the ground because I couldn't secure programmers to pay them. Like you can't count on people volunteering all the time on your productions. As someone who takes calls for doing stagehand work and doing film and entertainment work, you can only volunteer for so long, right? So me going into this knowing that it's going to be incredibly difficult and knowing that it's going to be taking a long time. Like we won't have a deliverable to showcase for a minimal viable product until probably 2023. COVID hadn't happened. If COVID hadn't happened, I would have been able to start hiring people and paying people to work on it right now. I would have had at least 3 to 4 employees working on initial builds and doing some initial artwork. And I already have team members that are ready to do these kind of things. Like some of the motivators that have worked with Anvilhead Studios for the Bring Your Own Bass group, which was a N-Motion accelerated business and a game. I know some of the people that worked on that because when I came back to Nebraska from school, I searched for people who were working on video games in the state, and I went over and I did an interview with them to work with them. But really, it was me figuring out like what their goals were and what their focus was. And one thing that I found out is that they had a squared away team. You know, they had like 5 to 10 people who were motivated and were working on the project, and they had a space over at I think Metro Community College. They had like a co-op space over at Metro Community College that they're working on, right? And they did receive a grant for like $50,000, which is nothing to scoff at. You know, they had brand new machines. No, not 50. No, okay, but they did. they did get a grant. They did get a grant for starting their production and stuff like that, and they had some fresh machines and stuff like that. But when I went to go communicate with them about their goals, right? Because I'm a born and raised Nebraskan. I want entertainment and culture of Nebraska to be represented, and I want to see growth. And I was down to just straight volunteer for them where I could to help them out. And when I went and I communicated with them, like, hey, how are you selling your game? Like, who knows that you're even working on a video game? And they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna try and go to GDC and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, what about the state fair? Like, oh no, we're not gonna go to the state fair. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you go to the state fair? You're a Nebraska game developer. You need to be at the state fair, right? So while I'm working on this game and developing for this game, it's designed to be like an event, a live event competitive game, right? So we'll be developing on Unity, and it will be able to have like events based around it. There will be live competition essentially. So what'll happen is what'll happen is that while we're in development of this video game, is we'll be able to rent out the bourbon, like the bourbon in Lincoln, right? We'll rent out the bourbon, and then I'll get a video wall. I'll get a video wall from Knamorh Productions to go up on the stage, and then we'll have the table for our main machine that's able to like have multiple people competing on that game and having a live event of people racing right then and there. So we don't necessarily need to sell copies of the video game right away to be successful. We just have to sell the concept of the video game and the event around the video game and the culture of like an aerial combat arcade racer. Like, oh, you got your flying car, let's go get first, you know? So just the development of the game itself is going to be a phenom. Like it's going to inspire people that are in my field to care. Like it's going to be giving artists and creatives of Nebraska, like, oh, there is a video game that's being worked on in Nebraska, and it has the scale potential to be influential, and it's not an unrealistic goal. Like, don't get me wrong, bring your own base was a cool concept. It was really awesome, but the thing is that it was way too much. It was way too much early on. There was they had to have like a custom base built, and the game was entirely reliant on multiplayer. Like they had to have like at least 4 to 8 people in their matches at all times for it to be like an enthralling game, to get that gameplay loop going. Whereas with a racing game, they're all on an AI track. Like it's essentially just a big old tube with a path in it, and then you got 10 ships that are flying around, and then you as the individual, you're just able to stay on that path. It can be a single player game. As a product, a racing game is a lot more viable than a solely dedicated multiplayer game, right? And so I am currently in the stages of developing contracts, establishing my budget, and that all takes like a huge amount of time. You got to spend money to make money. And with COVID happening, that's the thing, is that the beginning of this discussion, this beginning of this presentation was how like I'm a career entertainment worker. And when COVID happened, that just derailed all of this. Originally I was supposed to be giving this presentation this time last year, right? I was originally supposed to be giving this presentation this time last year, but I'm not, and I'm here now. I just got to keep on keeping on. And I'm looking forward to essentially creating the first production center in the state of Nebraska. And what a production center is a production that's hiring so many people that it can be union grade, right? And that's a big deal. Like that's a huge deal. The closest production center we have in the Midwest is in Kansas City. It's down in Missouri, right? So since this project is something that's going to be spanning years, and I'll have dedicated above the line salary staff, I'll also have to create what we call in the industry production cycles. And production cycles can span between 30 days to 90 days kind of thing, right? And during those production cycles, I'll be hiring a lot of people. Like I'll have my dedicated staff for this studio production and for this game that will always be working on like solving problems and stuff like that. But there'll be times where I'll have like easily like 30, 40 people working on solving specific problems, from everything to making models to solving for collisions and combat, and for making promos. There's going to be a whole production cycle that's just dedicated to voice acting work. There's going to be a section of production where I'm going to be having Katie Oten from UNO, who she's going to be doing voice direction and having all these ship talents like talking and stuff like that. And since Slipstream 5000 is a racing game, it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very market friendly. So I have to be prepared for localization across all the world. So I will be having to hire all different kinds of dubbing and subtitles in multiple languages. And going into this initially, while I'm in my initial production cycles, means that when I go to publishers later on, means that I'm not screwing around. And by having union grade contracts using local 839 standard of animating and modeling, local 839 is the Animators Guild out in California. None of us here in Nebraska would follow under their jurisdiction, right? But since I'm an IATSE station and steam mechanic, I fall under the non-Maryland area standard agreement. And by establishing my budget based off of California standards, I will be able to have talent who are here in the state of people who are taking calls doing like just design work, just taking software gigs for like these corporate motivators here in the state. If I'm able to go up to them and be like, hey man, we're going 839 standards for pay, and I'm only going to need you for like 60 days to be able to do this kind of problem solving. Can you convince your employer to let you go for that amount of time? And the thing is, I need to be able to leverage having them work for me by budgeting squared away pay, right? And that all is like, that's all time. Like figuring that all out is time, and you gotta spend money, make money, all that jazz. But going into game development with the concept that like, yo, we're going to be doing union grade productions, we're going to have proper production cycles, there will be above the line staff, is something that other publishers aren't necessarily used to, which will separate my project from a lot of other competition that are going on in the world. And so that's what, if you hear from me here over the next like couple months and stuff like that, or the next year or so, this is going to be the project that you'll probably be hearing from me about. And that's what I'm gonna be ended on today.
And thank you so much, Nathan. I would like to leave a few minutes for questions. So does anybody have questions for Nathan?
I've got a question. So looking into the market in Nebraska specifically, what's your research been? I don't know anything about the gaming industry, but specifically locally. So I'd like to hear more about that.
So Nebraska, we do have a gaming market. There are influencers from our state. Dr. Lupo is from Omaha. There are Twitch streamers in Nebraska. We have fiber internet in Nebraska. There is a market for gaming in Nebraska. One concept that's kind of enrolled into this is that I might end up doing a gaming convention in the Pinnacle Bank Arena to help promote the game, as well as being able to bring in other motivators. But yes, it's gaming in Nebraska is huge. I mean, there's nothing to do. There's no, like, it's either drinking or going to live events. It's not that, it's playing video games. Okay. I could easily sell 10,000 copies in Nebraska like that. Like it wouldn't be hard at all for me to get 10,000 pre-orders just from Nebraskans, just by flexing the fact that I'm a Nebraskan. I'm born and raised in Nebraska. We're going to be making this video game in Nebraska. If you secure a $30 pre-order, that $30 is 1 hour's worth of work, right? Like by securing a $30 pre-order, that's 1 hour's worth of work. I can get 10,000 pre-orders easy. Like to be honest, like I could have posters. I could have posters in all the major venues asking for like, hey, we're going to be working on a video game. We're going to need talent. We're going to need labor. And if you throw in $30 to help, help with the pre-release of this game, then you're going to be helping other artists get paid in the state. So I know for a fact that in Nebraska, there's a huge market. There's a huge market for video games. Like, we're one of the top 10 internet speeds in the state. There are people who, like, oh my gosh. I know people that moved from California to come to Nebraska to stream because the cost of living is so cheap that they're able to stream here in Nebraska. Like, they played video games out in California professionally, right? They play video games out in California professionally. They move back to Nebraska to keep on playing video games because it's cheaper out here for them to do it. And I can call in a few favors and get some eyeballs,
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
Hey, can I jump
Leslie.
in, see? Yeah, hey, Nathan, so impressive I'm not a gamer, but I know a bunch of them, and I love the idea of flying around the world and racing in an airplane. And I especially love your idea of tackling the brain drain challenge that we have in Nebraska. I do have a question, though. It's more towards the beginning of your presentation about your industry background. So our little bookstore is just within blocks of the Bourbon and the Rococo and the Lead. And we have sorely missed the energy that those performing arts venues bring to downtown. What are you seeing for the future? How soon changes might happen, and what kind of changes you think we might see because of this horrible year we've had?
It's not good. It's horrible. Let's put it this way. The guy that used to run the Bourbon and used to be responsible for like getting all the shows at the Bourbon, who is one of my call stewards for like getting shows at the Pepsi Center and stuff like that. This is a guy that would be working venues all around the Midwest. He washes windows now. Okay, so this is someone whose entire life has been doing live events and live shows, and he washes windows. You know, so local 42 in Omaha. I know that we lost at least 5 crew members to COVID, and at least 75% of all the union staff in Omaha switched jobs. So and I had to fight to get my unemployment. It was an absolute nightmare. You had to prove that you were applying for other jobs, but if it even says on the application, if you're part of a union in a union hiring hall, that you don't have to do that. But guess what? The process didn't work, and there are tons of professional stagehands and studio mechanics that didn't get their unemployment for a whole year. I know guys that didn't get they had to get all their back pay last month. So it's absolutely horrible and atrocious. And the thing is that by me, originally I was wanting to work on this video game in 2020, but then all this happened. This video game is a avenue for people who are professionals and stagehand studio mechanics to be able to work on a project that isn't entirely reliant on live work, kind of thing. But it's bad. It's horrible. I mean,
Are acts starting to be booked for later this year or next year, or do you see any pathway?
There's some. I mean, the Bourbon's going to be having a show here at the end of the month. Disney on Ice happened recently, but Broadway said that they're not doing shows till fall. Live Nation said that they're not going to be doing shows again till end of summer. You know, I mean, vaccines aren't going to be available to the public until April. All right, like for my age, for my demographic, we won't be able to get access to vaccines in the state of Nebraska based off of the determined plan till April, right? And that means that's when it will start. So people won't even be getting their vaccines till we'll be catching up till May, and that is the audience that attends these shows, right? So just based off of vaccine rollout, don't really be expecting shows till June, I guess is a good way to describe it, because
I'm good with June. Good with June.
The liability that comes with it, the liability that comes with having shows before people have their vaccinations is a big.
Yeah.
Can I add a question?
All right, Nathan, we are out of time, so I'm sorry that we ran out of time for questions. But Nathan, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge. I'm sure you can all reach out to Nathan if you have more questions. I hope you'll join us next week. What was that, Nathan?
I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat here.
Okay, excellent. Join us next week for Jonathan Jank. He's going to give us an update on the exciting things happening in Seward County. And the following week, we have Todd Baker with Baker's Candies in Greenwood. So stay safe, get your vaccination if you have the opportunity, and stay well, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.